When German soldiers marched into war in 1939, they believed one thing with absolute confidence: Britain was weak. They believed British soldiers were outdated, slow, and trapped in the past, relics of World War I, who relied on tradition instead of modern warfare. German officers joked that Britain would collapse the moment it faced a real, mechanized army. But as the war dragged on, something strange happened. The British Army didn't break. It adapted, and in some cases, it surprised the Germans more than any other enemy. From the beaches of Dunkirk to the deserts of North Africa, from night raids to stubborn last stands, German opinions about British soldiers changed. Sometimes to respect, sometimes to frustration, and sometimes to fear. This is the story of what Germans really thought about British soldiers in World War II. Not propaganda, not myths, but what German officers and soldiers admitted after facing them in battle. Stay until the end, because the final realization shocked even Germany's best commanders. Before the war, German military planners saw Britain as a declining empire. They believed the British Army relied too much on colonial troops, outdated tactics, and slow decision-making. Compared to Germany's fast-moving blitzkrieg doctrine, British forces seemed rigid and defensive. German intelligence reports described British units as overly cautious, too dependent on artillery, resistant to change. In the early months of the war, these assumptions seemed correct. During the Battle of France in 1940, British and French forces were outmaneuvered by German panzer divisions. German officers believed this confirmed everything they thought they knew. One German staff officer later wrote that British soldiers were brave but badly led. To the Germans, bravery without speed meant defeat. But what German commanders misunderstood was this: the British Army was not designed to win quickly. It was designed to survive, regroup, and fight again. That misunderstanding would come back, too, when the German army surrounded Allied forces at Dunkirk. They expected total destruction. Instead, they witnessed something unexpected. British soldiers fought delaying actions with incredible discipline, holding defensive lines long enough for evacuation to succeed. German units advancing through the countryside encountered small British groups that refused to surrender, even when outnumbered. German infantry officers later admitted that British rearguard units were annoyingly stubborn. They didn't counterattack recklessly. They didn't panic. They simply held their ground and withdrew only when ordered. This behavior confused German commanders. Blitzkrieg depended on rapid collapse, but the British didn't collapse. Even more shocking was the evacuation itself. German troops watched thousands of soldiers disappear across the channel. Not defeated, but saved. One German officer wrote that Dunkirk felt like a victory that did not feel like victory. From that moment, German perceptions began to change. The British were not broken. They were still in the fight. When British forces first faced the Germans in North Africa, German soldiers were unimpressed. British troops wore shorts. They drank tea under fire. They followed strict routines, even in combat zones. To German troops, this looked ridiculous. Early clashes reinforced German confidence, especially after Rommel arrived with the Afrika Korps. German soldiers believed British commanders were slow and predictable. But again, appearances were deceptive. British units learned fast. They adapted to desert warfare, improved coordination between infantry, tanks, and artillery, and mastered defensive tactics. Most importantly, they absorbed defeats without collapsing. ... German soldiers began to notice something unusual. British troops returned after losses, better prepared than before. They fortified positions carefully. They used deception, fake tanks, and misleading radio traffic. They forced the Germans to fight on ground of Britain's choosing. By El Alamein, German officers no longer laughed. They respected British discipline, engineering skill, and refusal to give up. One German tanker admitted, "The British soldier is calm, even when things go badly. That makes him dangerous." German soldiers often criticized British infantry for being slow. British units advanced carefully, supported by artillery and armor, instead of aggressive rushes. To German eyes, this looked inefficient. But there was a reason for it. British doctrine prioritized minimizing losses and maintaining unit cohesion. British soldiers were trained to hold positions under fire and follow orders even in chaos. German soldiers discovered that British defensive positions were difficult to break. British troops dug deep trenches, built strong points, and coordinated with artillery in a methodical way. They were not flashy, but they were reliable. German soldiers fighting in Italy described British units as persistent. They attacked again and again, even after setbacks. One German report described British soldiers as never hurried, never panicked, but always present. This quality frustrated German commanders, who expected decisive breakthroughs. Instead, they faced grinding resistance. One area where German soldiers truly feared the British was night operations. British forces became experts at fighting in darkness. Commandos, SAS units, and regular infantry patrols conducted raids, sabotage missions, and reconnaissance deep behind German lines. German troops dreaded British night patrols. They reported sudden attacks, silent knife work, and swift disappearances. British units often struck at supply depots, airfields, and communication lines. German soldiers called them ghosts. The SAS in particular left a lasting impression. German commanders issued special orders to hunt British raiders aggressively. a sign of how seriously they were taken. One German officer later admitted, "At night, the British were everywhere. We never felt safe." This reputation changed German attitudes permanently. The British were no longer seen as outdated. They were unpredictable. German opinions about British leadership were mixed. They criticized some British generals for caution and slow decision-making, but they admired British junior officers. British officers often led from the front. They shared hardships with their men and maintained discipline without brutality. German prisoners frequently remarked on British professionalism and respect for rules of war. British units maintained structure even when commanders were killed or wounded. This impressed German observers. One German POW said, "The British fight like a machine that never breaks, even when damaged." The German army valued initiative. The British army valued reliability. Both had strengths. After the Normandy landings, German views of British soldiers changed completely. British units advanced steadily through difficult terrain, facing fierce resistance in places like Caen. German commanders realized British forces were not trying to win quickly. They were wearing Germany down. British artillery dominated the battlefield. British engineers cleared mines and built bridges at remarkable speed. German soldiers admitted that British troops were methodical and relentless. They did not retreat easily. By late 1944, German troops fighting British units knew the truth. Britain was not a fading power. It was a disciplined, experienced army backed by industrial strength and allies. The misjudgment was complete. After the war, German generals wrote memoirs, and their tone had changed. They no longer mocked British soldiers. They described them as professional, disciplined, and mentally tough. British soldiers were not the most aggressive. They were not the fastest, but they were among the hardest to break. German officers admitted that Britain's refusal to surrender in 1940 changed the entire war. Without Britain, there would have been no Western Front, no D-Day, no final defeat of Nazi Germany. In the end, Germany's greatest mistake was underestimating the British soldier. History is shaped not just by strength, but by perception. And Germany's perception of British soldiers was wrong. If you want more videos that break down what enemies really thought of each other, forgotten battlefield realities, and real World War II history, subscribe to ConflictFrame. Watch more videos on the channel to uncover the stories hidden behind the headlines. Because sometimes, the most powerful weapon in war is being underestimated.